Good morning, Year 9, and welcome to today's lesson. Not the way I'd have chosen to do this, but there we are. I ought to say you don't have to submit anything at the end of this lesson, because obviously all things going to plan, I will actually see you on Wednesday. So please just make sure that you have the work in your books. Don't worry about uploading anything. Before you start, please make sure that you have access to the magazine's One Conventions document. You'll be using this later in the lesson. I suppose a bit of a clue, we are moving on to our second area of the media that we're studying. We finished adverts, we're now looking at magazines. So let's have a think about media language. We've talked a lot about media language in relation to adverts and indeed in relation to other media products. And there are two key terms that I taught you, and these are visual codes and verbal codes. I'd like to look at this magazine cover. This is Now, and I'd like you to identify some of the visual codes on that magazine, and then I'd like you to identify some of the verbal codes. And I'd like to think, how is this similar to an advert? Okay, it's a magazine cover, obviously a slightly different media form. How is it similar to an advert? You've got about 5 minutes to do that. I have a feeling the timer might run for 5 minutes. When you're ready, move on to the next slide. Now, basically, the visual codes are all the images, and there are a lot of them. So the visual codes are all the pictures, the expressions, the clothes. You've got Jordan at the top corner, Katie Price, in other words, looking a little bit kind of menacing. She's committed some sort of betrayal. The Beckhams looking a little bit kind of questioning. Their marriage is a struggle. Jen looking a bit kind of serious. Don't use me, Brad, and so on and so forth. So um, we can read into those expressions. They're all visual codes. The verbal codes, all the text, the strap lines, the cover lines, all of the words that direct our interpretation of the images. And we've talked about how text can anchor images, and that's what's happening here. A few more technical terms for you. We've got what's called direct mode of address, and this is where we've actually got the magazine effectively talking directly to you. And that's what's happening here. Don't use me, Brad. The masthead. Now, the masthead is the technical term that we use for the name of the magazine and the way that that's written, the typeface that's used, the way that it's presented. It's called a masthead. Most magazines feature the price because obviously you have to buy them, and that's usually featured on the front cover. Magazines often use cover lines or cell lines that they're otherwise known as, and they're basically the descriptions, very brief descriptions of the stories. As I mentioned, non-verbal codes are things like expressions, clothes, the way that people look. Tagline or cell line, strap line, that is the effectively the slogan for the magazine. The central image, there's always a central image. Sometimes a magazine only has one image, in this case being a gossip celebrity lifestyle magazine now is full of them. And all the text is verbal codes, and that little circle with 20% off fashion, that's called a plug. And so the verbal codes, all the text. Now, how is it like an advert? Well, it's basically like an advert because it's trying to sell a magazine, and that's what a front cover does. It's trying to effectively act as a point of entry for the reader. It's trying to get you to buy the magazine to find out all about what is going on inside. Now, don't worry too much about all this terminology. We'll cover it all again later. It's just to introduce you to the basic idea. I would say if you want to print this particular slide out as a handy reference guide, you can do, although as I say, we will be looking at this terminology in a bit more depth later. I want you to think about why people might read magazines. Try and think about 4 reasons why people might read magazines. And I'd like to think particularly about uses and gratifications theory. If you remember, we talked about uses and grats towards the back end of last term. And this idea about why people might use the media for things like entertainment, information, for about connecting with other people, and about your own personal identity. So I'd like to note down 4 reasons that you think people might have for reading magazines. Now, obviously, there are a range of reasons why people might read magazines. So you may come up with reasons that I haven't thought of. But anyway, we'll see what you come up with. So 2 or 3 minutes, and then move on to the next slide. A few ideas I had. You can read magazines to learn new skills, particularly makeup skills and about how to do particular things. Depending on the magazine, of course. I mean, some magazines are geared up totally towards hobbies and things like that and designed to teach how to do things. Other magazines, it's less obvious. But for example, Some magazines, the Cosmopolitan, drop a dress size by tonight. Well, that implies that it's going to teach you how to do some sort of extreme dieting. You'll find information about the world, and lots of the cover lines of both of these magazines tend to be about finding things out about the world. Who was Android Andy, for example? And a lot of the cover lines are framed in that sort of way that you are gonna find stuff out, and particularly about celebrities. Not every magazine focuses just on celebrities, but a lot do. Um, and it gives you something to talk about. I mean, in a way, magazines are losing ground to the internet quite substantially. Magazines come from the media as it was before things like Facebook and uh, Instagram and so on and so forth. So in a way, that role of magazines is being supplanted, but you can still find out information about the world and then talk to your friends and family about that. And magazines do still have a role to play there. And a lot of magazines, particularly lifestyle magazines, focus on suggesting that they can make your life better. They can teach you secrets, 21 secrets to make him fall in love fast, the 50 people who are actually the most influential in Britain, and so on and so forth. So it's giving you information, and it's going to teach you stuff that's going to make your life better. So you might have come up with other ideas as well. Now, magazines have their own particular conventions, as we've discussed, and really the most important of these, the masthead, and you need to learn that terminology. It's not the title of the magazine; it's the masthead, and we're thinking about the title, the font, the typeface, the way that it's presented. Usually, the masthead is at the top of the magazine cover. Usually, it's one of the most prominent bits of text. All the cover lines act as anchorage. We've talked about anchorage before, and the anchorage basically provides a narrative for the image. So, as we've discussed, most images are polysemic, they have multiple meanings. The anchorage locks that meaning in place. It gives the image a meaning. The typography is the term we give to the text, and that is not just the font that's been chosen, but the way the text is presented, whether it's left justified or right justified, the size and the colour, and so on and so forth. So the word typography will relate to cover lines, it will relate to the masthead, cell lines, puffs and plugs, things like that. And cell lines or cover lines, and they're sometimes called cell lines, they're sometimes called cover lines. Both is absolutely fine. They are effectively promoting what is in the magazine. They are giving you information. So they are the basic conventions of a magazine. You can see there the GQ magazine cover. You've got a clear guide to what those conventions are. Now, obviously, if we were in the lesson, I'd have printed that out to give to you. We're not. If you want to print it out, stick it in, that's fine. But we are going to be looking at that in a little bit more detail later on in the lesson. Now, this is kind of the main activity of the lesson. It's going to take you about 10 minutes. Talks about terminology. And what I need you to do is I need you to be able to use the key terminology associated with magazines. Now, some of these you might know, some of these you might not. But what you need to do is, first of all, download the conventions table if you've not done it already. And then you'll see these words are in the left-hand column. What you need to do is write in or type in your definitions to the right. If you can't print the table out or you can't type into it, then what you're going to have to do is just write this down as a bullet pointed list in your book. So these are the words: space, focal point, splash, caption, exclusive or tag, masthead, puffs and plugs, filler, cover lines, selling lines, copy, key images. What you need to do is the ones that you know, write in. The ones that you don't, then what you'll need to do is you need to fill those in when it comes to the answers. Right, so space, basically, it's also sometimes called white space, so it's not always white on a magazine cover, and it is empty space that's used to balance out a design. And sometimes magazines will use this, sometimes they won't. Neither Reveal nor Tatler, the two magazine covers that we're going to be looking at, use very much empty space. Focal point. The focal point is the main focus of the cover, and that is usually the main image and the main cover line. So basically, that is what your attention is drawn to. It's the most significant thing on the cover. It's the focus. A splash. Splash is the name given to the main cover story. So basically, the main image, the main cover line, that is the splash. Captions are any written text under a photograph. Now, basically, you could argue that cover lines and strap lines are also captions. They are kind of, but more formally, you'd only really find captions inside the magazine under photographs. An exclusive tag is basically where a story is promoted as being an exclusive if it's only available in the magazine, and that is a selling point that is trying to get someone to pick up the magazine because otherwise they're not going to find that information out. The masthead, that is the title, it's a key part of the brand of the magazine. It uses a particular font, typeface, and design. Puffs and plugs, they are promotions for what is inside, and they can be little called out, boxed out bits of information about exclusive deals in the magazine. Usually they're under the masthead, competitions and prizes, things like that. Filler is the name given to a non-essential story that is there because the magazine needed something to fill a gap. And sometimes you can spot stories that look like filler, that they're like non-stories. There isn't really anything there. I mean, on the Reveal cover, a story like At Home with Mark and Michelle looks like a filler story. There isn't very much to it. Cover lines, they're the summaries of the stories, and that's what makes up most of the text on the cover. Strap lines are basically where you've got like a headline or a cover line and a little bit more text next to it or above it or below it sometimes actually, giving you a bit more insight into the story. That's a strap line. Also, my understanding is the little slogan of a magazine is also a strap line. Not every magazine has one though. Neither Tatler nor Reveal have them, I don't think. Copy is the name we give to any text used in an article. I mean, technically, all the text on the cover is copy as well. And the key images are the main pictures on the pages or on the cover. Tatler only has one key image, Reveal has loads. So please, the ones you didn't get, make sure that you copy out so you actually have them in your book to refer back to, because it's the terminology we're going to use when we talk about magazines. One of the things you need to be able to do is you need to be able to analyze a magazine. So we're going to look here at a cover of a magazine called GQ, Gentleman's Quarterly. And we need to think not just about what is there, what is denoted, but what is connoted. So we're going to look at a few elements. The masthead, first of all, GQ, stands for Gentleman's Quarterly. And a gentleman connotes the idea of being a perfect, successful man. So it has the quality of being something which is special. Now, the typeface that's been chosen is a big, what's called a serifed font. Or actually, in my mind, it's a weird font because it's kind of almost sans serif. Serifs are the little twiddly bits, the little kind of, if you notice on the cover lines like Leo Rising, you've got those little bits sticking out and they're serifs. So I don't think it is a serif font. I think it's a sans serif font. It's very bold. It stands out. The use of the green also makes it stands out, draws your attention to it. So the masthead in a sans serif font trying to really drag your attention. There's only one image on the cover, the main image. It's Leonardo DiCaprio. He was and still is, I think, quite a successful Hollywood star, a role model, an actor, fashion icon. The picture that's chosen of him is quite a typical star shot. It's a medium close up. In that it's not just his face, it's his upper body. Gives you a look at his clothes, gives you a focus on his expression. You'll notice the masthead is superimposed over Leo, which suggests the magazine thinks it's a little bit more important than him. We know he's the main story because his cover line is the biggest, Leo Rising, and that's obviously a play on Leo as in the constellation and the star sign type thing. But also implying his success. It connotes that he is getting more successful. The strapline there, DiCaprio on money, success, and power. And that kind of suggests a stereotype of men in society. It also suggests that he knows about it. And the colour scheme's interesting here, isn't it? That you've got Leo in green, money, success, and power in green. Kind of links him to them. You've got DiCaprio. So as well as Leo, you've got DiCaprio, just in case you didn't know who he was. You've got other cover lines as well about Tony Abbott. You've got the business issue, why your job is making you fat. Could you be a cuddle pimp? We reveal the jobs of the future. So all of these are focused on lifestyle. They're focused on how your career, how your life is going to develop. And again, these are stereotypes of masculinity. It's all focused on men and the stereotype of the man being the provider, the man being the person who makes the money. So the cover lines, the cell lines, they're designed to give you an indication of not only what's in the magazine, but the tone and the mood of the magazine. And the colour scheme, it's a limited colour scheme. You've got green, black, and grey. The white, obviously, is the white space. The green could suggest money. It could suggest wealth. Green is a colour that's often associated with money. More in the US than Australia, it has to be said. The purple of, I thought it was black actually. Um, so purple has connotations of wealth and royalty, but I don't see that as purple. Um, black tends to have quite a masculine quality to it, and as does grey. So there's a very limited colour scheme that's designed to draw your attention, not just to the magazine cover, but to the text. So that is how a very basic way that we can deconstruct a magazine cover. We're going to look at that in more detail on Wednesday. But before we do that, we're gonna have a look at another magazine cover, and I'm going to ask you to answer some questions about this. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like to think about some specific elements of this magazine cover, and I'd like to answer these in full questions. So what you'll need to do is, if you can print this out, you can write on the table. Otherwise, you're going to need to just answer these questions in your book. So the first question, the masthead. The magazine is called Cosmopolitan. So you might need to look up what the word cosmopolitan means, and then you need to think about, well, what does this connote about the magazine? And I'd also like to think about the colour. I'd like you to think about the typeface that's been used. And I'd like you to think about the way that Katy Perry, who is the main cover star, is superimposed over the masthead. What does that suggest about Katy Perry? And what's her relationship with Cosmopolitan? Number two, one of the cell lines, drop a dress size by tonight. Now, what does that suggest that the magazine is going to tell the reader? Why do you think they've used those words, drop a dress size by tonight? What does that suggest? And why do you think they've used that sort of goldy colour? What are the connotations of the colour? Number three, the cell line, jewels, shoes and bags galore. What does that suggest the content of the magazine's going to be? What are the connotations of jewels, shoes and bags? What does the word galore mean? And what are the implications of that? You might need to look it up. Galore. Number four, what does the costume, hair and makeup connote about Katy Perry? Look at what she's wearing. Look at how she's posed. What does that suggest about the nature of the readership of Cosmopolitan, what they're going to want? Think about how the cover is arranged around Katy Perry, the cover star. How is that designed to draw attention to her? And finally, what I'd like to do is choose one other thing from the cover to analyze. What is the denotation? What is the connotation? So that could be another cover line. Well, that's pretty much all there is. Or you could talk a little bit about the layout. So an example, the cell line of Cosmo's Ultimate Woman of the Year connotes the magazine will inform the reader of the most successful, famous female celebrities. The reader might aspire to be like those role models. So that's the kind of level that I want you to write at. This should take you about 10 minutes to do. When you've done that, of course, you don't have to photograph your work. You don't have to upload it. Just make sure it's in your book and make sure it's all ready for Wednesday when hopefully I will see you. And that is it.